Hello, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, college football fans across the nation and around the world. This is Tim May with the Tim May Podcast. It's an aptly named podcast, right, Boston Ward?
It's my favorite podcast in existence.
I think we could come up with one with you. Maybe later on it'd be Tim May and the Boss. You know what I mean? That could be a podcast also, because I obviously take orders from you and Will Crawl and occasionally from Glue Man. You know him as Spencer Holbrook, but I digress.
If Spencer is giving you directions and bossing you around, you let me know, because that's not happening.
Yeah, but dude, I get desperate sometimes. I'll take it from anybody. This is, in my opinion, another special pie. I think they're all special in their own right, But like I talked about last week, I wanted to spend a little, maybe an hour or so about this offensive. It's not really an explosion. It's more like a rolling thunder that's been going on since 2012, when first Urban Meyer took the reins at Ohio State and then moved on now to Ryan Day. And just every year there's something new and, one of another term, more explosive about this offense. And it has a lot to do with who's been playing quarterback, but then the weapons that they've assembled around them. And, now Ohio State has as great an arsenal of weapons as I think any school in the country going into 2020. You and I are going to talk about that after my conversation with Urban Meyer, who's been really good about coming on this podcast now a few times, and he wants to keep doing it on a semi-regular basis, which is A-okay with me. But and what's really great is this is a guy who sort of revolutionized the play of offense in the three leagues he was in as a head coach. I mean, I'm talking about the MAC and then the Mountain West when he went to Utah, and the MAC at Bowling Green. And then, of course, the four leagues he was in, what I'm talking about. Then he went to the SEC and shook everybody up with that spread offense when they said you can't play that spread offense there against really great defenses. Duh. And then, of course, he comes into the Big Ten and does exactly the same thing. And now, slowly but surely teams around the league have emulated in one form or fashion, tried to emulate. We'll get into that a little bit when you and I talk about things, what he has done offensively. So, without further ado, let's get to my interview with Urban Meyer, followed by another great, scintillating, maybe few minutes with my man Boston Ward. And then I want to give a tribute to one of the great people, maybe the greatest person ever in my life, because she's the one who had me, my mom, who passed away this past week in Lufkin, Texas, after a short but tough illness. So if you'll just indulge me with that, ladies and gentlemen, at the end. But here first is my interview with Urban Meyer. As promised, ladies and gentlemen, we're back again with Urban Meyer. And Urban, I wanted to have you on my podcast again because Boston Ward and I are talking today about the proliferation of offense at Ohio State. I call it the rolling thunder effect ever since you took over in 2012, and it's just carried on. And you just get the idea that this year with Justin Fields and the complement of weapons that he'll have around him, and then the stout offensive line he's got to have in front of him, this could be the best of potential-wise. But I want to get back to you. When you took over as a head coach, why did you determine it was so important to be aggressive, play offense? Because you were coming from working under Lou Holtz and then Bob Davie. I wouldn't call those the most aggressive offensive coaches in the country at the time. But what was it that just spurred you on to play offense?
Yeah, I was an offensive coach, and I don't want to say I was frustrated, but I always had a dream of having a wide open offense. And Dan Mullen was my GA at Notre Dame, and he came with me to Bowling Green. And this is right at the evolution of the spread offense, where Kevin Wilson at Purdue, Rich Rod was at Clemson, and really no one else was doing it. Joe Tiller started a little different version. It was more of a basketball and grass type. We didn't want that. I wanted to have a power offense, but I wanted to utilize speed. I was a receiver coach my entire career, and my dream was to have the fastest, most athletic players in space.
Yeah.
And I went to we went to, and I say it was mostly Dan Mullen and myself. We had some other great coaches, but the amount of time and effort we spent to put this offense together, that was probably the most enjoyable part of my coaching career. Is this there wasn't a page 3 or page 4 turn. Let's how to do this. Let's try this. And we tried in practice, and then we had some incredibly gifted players. So I look back now, and that was, I love to score points. Of all the great things during the course of the game, I used to get so upset when we had to kick a field goal or we had to punt the ball, And so I'm not talking about the games where, it's talents equated and all that. But, I mean, when you're better than the team, you ought to score every time you touch the ball.
Yeah. And to me, that's always been my philosophy, even though I wasn't a coach. When in doubt, air it out was my big line. But you went from Bowling Green, the MAC, to Utah in the Mountain West, where people are going, okay, the competition's going to be a little bit better now. Yet if anything, you enhanced that with Alex Smith, et cetera. And then you went to the SEC, where hey, you can't do that in the SEC, coach. All these teams play this great defense. They've got all these great players on defense and stuff every step of the way. And of course, what you did. You've revolutionized things in the Big Ten. Everybody's trying to copy it. But my point was, you felt that this would carry through no matter at what level, right? As long as you kept getting kept recruiting the players that could make it happen, right?
Yeah, I'd like to think too, and Ryan Day's carried it on, is it's very adaptable. When I hear a coach, one thing you're never allowed to say is a player doesn't fit the system.
Yeah.
You change the system. And you look at, there's nothing more clearly than Braxton Miller and JT Barrett and Cardell. Cardell was so different than those two. Then Dwayne Haskins comes in so different. Then you get a kid like Justin Fields that can do it all. So I want to do the one thing about football, and I learned this from Earl Bruce, is the fundamentals of the game will never change. It's going to look a little bit different. Matter of fact, it's going to look a lot different. But at the end of the day, the same fundamentals that Woody Hayes taught, the same that Earl Bruce taught, the same that all the great coaches throughout the history game, and it's all about toughness. It will always be about toughness. It'll be about tackling, blocking. However, it's also about numbers and leverage. And that's something that the way my mind worked, I would always count numbers. And why would you ever do something that doesn't equate numbers? And that's a term that I've used for 17 years. Ryan still uses it today. But why put your players in harm's way? Football is a tough, violent sport. If you have unblocked defenders near the line of scrimmage, that's not a good day for who's ever carrying the ball. Mm-hmm. So our whole thing, and it depends. I've heard people say, well, JT Barrett was a great runner. We didn't do that with Cardell Jones. You don't do that with we did that with Tim Tebow and certainly Braxton, but not Alex Smith or not a drop back player. So, or Dwayne Haskins, of course. So it was all about equating numbers, yet carrying on the fundamentals of the great game of football.
It's funny. I was blessed growing up in Texas, Alabama and in Texas, and I got to sit in on 2 Bill Yeoman lectures about the veer option way back when, and that was revolutionary in its own way. I mean, you were just a little bitty kid back when he was doing that, but just what Houston football, with great athletes, like you said, in space, and that was a different approach. And yet, you look at the zone read option and how that basically takes a player out of the play. You know what I mean? I mean, all these things you incorporated. What I don't know, as you look back in your time as coaching, what was that one year when you had everything you wanted from an offensive standpoint, weaponry, offensive line, et cetera? What would be that one team you would look at and go, this is what we're talking about?
Well, I've had several. When we put together that team at Utah, that was one of the best teams in college football history. We didn't have the depth. And teams really back then really had we put 700 yards on North Carolina in a game. It could have put more. We put 60 on BYU. We beat, we were beating all the Oregon and Cal and Arizona. Texas A&M, we put, I think, 50 points on them. And they're better players than we had. More depth. I won't say better players, more depth. And it was just they really didn't understand. Now you're seeing teams are pretty good at stopping it. I mean, it's all very cyclical. But going back to Houston and the veer, and Lou Holtz ran the veer as well, the similarities between veer and the spread offenses of today are there. Yeah. Most of these coaches are so young, they don't remember it. I do remember that. I remember studying it. I was a junkie. And it was how do you eliminate a defender? And really, how do you eliminate in the veer option when it's triple option, you eliminate 2 defenders. Yeah. Okay? Now play with the numbers. You're +2 on them. Yeah. It's hard to stop when you're +2 on anybody.
Yeah. Yeah. Agreed. Hey, last thing. and you kind of touched on this a minute ago, and I did too. Do you see this offense with Justin Fields and then the weapons he's got? I'm talking about, to a certain extent, some spectacular if they come along, obviously, at wide receiver and then at running back. If that comes along, Marcus Crowley's okay, et cetera. If Trey Sermon's coming in, et cetera. But do you see the potential here for this to be as prolific an offense as Ohio State has had? What's just your take on that?
Well, you look at the history of offensive football at Ohio State, and obviously Troy Smith, the 06 team, would go down as one of the great ones. Our 2014, I think statistically, might be one of the best. Or it might have been 2013 as well. But I want to say we led the Big Ten in offense every year, but maybe one, maybe two.
Yeah.
And I'm really disappointed that didn't happen, but I guess that happens. The key position to me is going to be running back. If Trey Sermons, Master Teague, and Crowley, you're losing a horse. We've always had you look at the last 7 years from Carlos Hyde to Zeke Elliott to J.K. Dobbins and Mike Weber, we've had a horse. And I'll fight anybody in this. You have to run the football to be successful at the highest level. I'm not talking about to get fans in the stands and all that, but at the end of the day, for you to go win a national championship, at some point you're going to have to line up and smack someone and knock the line of scrimmage back. They can do that, but do they have the weaponry at the tailback position? And will they stay healthy? Because you don't want to run, Justin Fields, they have two freshmen behind him, quarterback. So I know that's for a fact. They're going to be very cautious. They could run that kid a lot. But, he's got such good weaponry outside, like you said. The tight end is a guy that's almost forgotten, too, and he's the best tight end I've recruited out of high school. He's the best tight end I've seen come out of high school.
Yeah, that's what I'm talking about. Last thing, Urban, is there going to be a college football season in 2020? What's your take on it? I mean, your show, you've been on with your guys at Fox and stuff. Y'all are talking football right now. What's your take? I mean, obviously there's a resurgence here with this COVID-19 around the country. I just came back from Texas where my mom passed away, but it was good to get out of Texas because it's exploding down there to a certain extent. What's your take?
I got so many opinions, but the problem is I just read so much, Tim, like you do. I mean, I'm a junkie about this now because I don't know if it's political. I don't know if it's truth. I don't know because you'll read one thing and, we're thinking about going down to Florida, but, it's exploding down there. But then I talk to people and they say, no, it's not. It's only in certain areas.
Yeah.
And so and another reason they're saying it's exploding because they're testing more people than they ever tested, of course, So I don't know what to believe. I believed about 2 weeks ago there's 100% there was going to be a season. I still put it a very high 80% in some form. I don't know if it's going to be all the games, but there has to be. My gosh, what are we talking about, Tim? We got to get going. And I just hate to say anything because people take it the wrong way. I just hope and pray that the people making decisions, because I've been in those decisions. You're making decisions for people, lives or not, life or death, and those are tough situations to be in. And by the way, you're a podcast with Larry James.
Yeah,
it's one of the best I've ever heard.
Really? Thank you very much.
Larry James, I have the utmost respect for him, and I thought, first of all, I love Larry James, and you two together, that was an incredible listen. So appreciate that.
Well, I'll just say this on the record too, and I've told you this before. I thought you got totally bamboozled back in 2018. I get goosebumps now thinking about how I thought it was a miscarriage of justice, et cetera, all the way around. And Larry feels the same way I do about that, but for real reasons, not just because of a affection or something for somebody. You follow my drift. And Larry James and I go way back too, man. It's hilarious. But I appreciate your words there, Coach. And hey, stay well, man. We're gonna have you on some more if you'll go along with it, man. I really appreciate you.
You're one of my favorites. I'll do it as many times as you want, brother.
Ladies and gentlemen, Urban Meyer. Thank you very much, Urban.
Take care, Tim.
Yeah, Urban never disappoints, right, Boston?
Hey, I was just thinking early on, like, if you're going to have a boss on your show that's going to do it regularly, you should probably shoot for Urban Meyer instead of me. I mean, he always brings the goods. He's one of the most fascinating people that I've ever covered. I think I can say the same for you as well. Just, the insight, the way he sees things beyond football, and of course, I mean, the offensive genius as well. I mean, it's pretty remarkable. And if one of his last acts is paving the way for Ryan Day and picking him as that offensive coordinator, that turned out to be a pretty important move for the future of the program.
Yeah, but what stood out to me, and I pointed it out when I was talking with Urban, is that it's not just that he wanted to play; he had the guts to play offense. I mean, and sort of it was desperation when he first started, but he understood. My big line that the biggest play, most important play in football, is any touchdown, because when you score a touchdown, you have now suddenly put that other team. They've got to match it, or they lose the game.
Right.
And when you score 10, they've got to match 10, so you can follow that thinking. And that's the way I've always thought, when in doubt, my line, when in doubt, air it out. And that's just basically, man, go score points. It changes everything. It even makes things easier, believe it or not, or at least more predictable for your own defense. When the other team, if you can get them in a little bit of a desperate situation or a situation where they're a little more predictable or one-dimensional, it makes it easier to play defense. I mean, you still got to have great players, don't get me wrong, but it just changes the whole complexion, And as I pointed out, there are coaches that were just, they'd get a two touchdown lead and sit on it, and that's just asking for disaster. And the great thing about Urban is he approached it from a different manner. Ryan Day clearly has that mindset. You agree, correct?
Yeah, and I think, you look at – there was nothing wrong with Jim Tressel's style, for example. I mean, it was much more conservative, but he won a hell of a lot of games. And for all this talk that we always do hear about how Urban and Ryan Day have elevated recruiting, I mean, Jim Tressel was still putting a ton of guys in the NFL. He just didn't have that air-it-out mentality that you're talking about.
Well, until it came to certain situations, then he would. Yeah.
But it's, making that a key part of his offense was never going to be his priority. Ball control, eliminating big mistakes, playing good defense. You can win a lot of football games that way, and he did. And he won some very important games. But Urban, before he even got to Ohio State, was changing the game. And everybody knows what happened in those games in mid 2006, 2007, when the game started changing and Urban was driving that. When you're talking about it changing just the leagues he was in, it changed all of college football, because if you wanted to win on a major level and hoist that crystal ball at the end, you had to be able to throw the football, and you're not able to just, really turn that off and on.
Yeah.
You have to build everything. Obviously you have to have a quarterback, but you need an offensive line that is just as, versatile so that they can run block and pass protect. You need game-breaking talents that you can trust at wide receiver. Ohio State has always had running backs that they could rely on, but they needed different responsibilities where picking up blitzes or being a target out of the backfield. I mean, everything takes a lot of time to do that. Didn't even touch on the tight ends, which is tight end week at Lettermen Row. We'll get into plenty more of that. But my point is, to really enhance and get that passing attack to where you need it, it takes a lot of time. And it didn't even happen right away for Urban at Ohio State. We don't need to go all the way back to the clown show or, some of the issues with Braxton's arm not being able to do that and the shoulder injury and changing the offense and all that. But it really took some time. There were year after year after year where he's saying you got to take the next step as a passing attack. And even after they won the national title, they still weren't done. Look at the debacle in the desert in 2016. And, you need special players at quarterback, and you need a lot of special people around them.
Sometimes the other team just gets your number, and then sometimes the other team, Deshaun Watson was a pretty damn good quarterback. That was a hell of a roster when you look at it. But, I want to make sure people are, I don't have amnesia here. I know people have played offense in the Big Ten. I mean, big-time offense in the Big Ten. I mean, Mike White back in the 1980s with Illinois, and Joe Tiller brought basketball on grass to the Big Ten, spread it out, but didn't really change many people's ways of thinking in the Big Ten, if you follow my drift. John Cooper, man, the mid-1990s, man, Ohio State had as good an offense or as potent an offense as basically anyone in the country with the way they threw the ball, but also still pounded you with the power running game. 95, 96, 97, 98, even 94. Those were as good of offenses pretty much as there were in the country. And but the point about Urban was Urban came in with the idea of not just playing offense, but spreading the field, making you cover the width and depth of the field on a continual basis with a power running game behind that. And that, to me, is what's really been the difference in the offense. And now we're headed toward, as you and I talked about before we started this podcast, the fruition is coming, in my opinion, this year with Ohio State, if in fact it gets to play football, which we'll touch on briefly at the end. But the assemblage of skill position talent, plus playing behind a great offensive line, I think since 2012 when Urban Meyer showed up, and 2020 will be the second year under Ryan Day, this has the potential to be the greatest year by far in terms of prolific offense. Do you agree?
Yeah. First of all, you missed a great opportunity to talk about Joe Tiller's success at Wyoming. I don't think that we should ignore that.
Good point.
But
hey, you know what Joe Tiller always said about Purdue when he left Purdue for Wyoming? It's all downhill from here.
Well, he finished back uphill when he got his retirement cabin in Buffalo. I went up there. Now I'm digressing. But he was such a great guy to get to know a little bit back out in Wyoming. But anyway,
I was worried about him on the sidelines. You can ask my buddy Ray Stein. When games got tight, he started breathing through his mouth, and that scared me, man. Every time Purdue got in a big game. But go ahead now.
Yeah. So it's funny when I look at this roster, though, and we've been going through. We're almost through the offense. For the position weeks at Lettermen Row, and it seems really redundant because you look at it. I'm writing last week about the offensive line. Well, it could probably and should be the best in America. The tight ends. The question is always, are they going to throw them the football? But that doesn't really matter. I think that's one of the strongest units on the team, which is one of the best teams in America. Therefore, you got some of the best tight ends, and all of Jeremy Ruckert and Luke Farrell are both going to be NFL tight ends probably at this time next year.
Yeah.
And Cade Stover is somebody that people are absolutely gaga over what he could do at that position down the road. And then you just have a reliable guy like Jake Hausman to add in the 2 and sometimes 3 tight end packages as a blocker. But you have Trey Sermon, and if you have healthy Master T, you got another 1-2 punch, and a guy that we both like, Marcus Crowley. See how he factors in. So you have elite running backs. And then Chris Olave and Garrett Wilson, my goodness. I mean, find a better tandem than that anywhere in the country. And then that's without even talking about Fields and being the Heisman frontrunner. But you just go position by position, and you can make a case that they're the best units in America at every single spot. It's truly crazy. And if they got to play a full schedule, which I do not believe that they will get that opportunity this year for a number of reasons, the stats would just blow your mind. I mean, I can't even really grasp what they're capable of. LSU seemed like they had the perfect storm for that last year, and they were great. But I don't think top to bottom that their roster could have matched up with what Ohio State's offense could do this year.
Yeah. And then, Ohio State fans have been blessed the last 6 seasons. They've seen J.T. Barrett basically push almost untouchable some career records as a quarterback at Ohio State in terms of production, but mainly in terms of producing touchdowns.
Yep.
They saw Dwayne Haskins Jr. set the bar for the Big Ten. Maybe, although I don't know, Justin Fields, like you said, if he got a full season, we'll see where that goes. But for producing touchdowns in a season, I'm talking about Dwayne Haskins Jr. in 2018, and Justin Fields came along and threatened all of that, and including throwing a slew of touchdown passes. So, and that was as he developed as a passer. Like you said, now, he's got the guts of his offensive line returning. Still has to be proven, like Jameson Williams and some of these guys got to come along, the Julian Fleming and Mookie Cooper and some of these Jackson Smith-Nigba, and some of these guys have to come along in terms of development. I'm talking about the freshmen, but the depth at every position on the offensive side. If in fact Marcus Crowley comes back like we think he will, Master Teague the third, they bring him along so he's doesn't take a step backwards from his injury in the spring, but just the depth he has going for him in all of those positions. It's and I've been covering Ohio State since '84. In my opinion, it's unprecedented in terms of just the lethal aspect of it.
Yeah, and even if you remove Fields from the equation, I'm not Gunnar Hoke, if they'd rescheduled the season to start on Saturday, I think he'd be the backup. But at some point down the road, you're talking about C.J. Stroud, who was a year ago, like right now, was winning the Elite 11 basically out of nowhere to become one of the most recognizable recruits at quarterback in the country. Jack Miller at one time was that way too. You're attracting now the best of the best at quarterback, and obviously, we know what Troy Smith did and Terrell Pryor. It's not like this is totally new, but the fact that Ohio State can go out and get almost any arm that it wants, and it's not trying to create sort of gimmicky packages the way that Terrell Pryor or Braxton Miller had at the start of his career, where basically they more so for Braxton, where it was go win the game any way possible and touch it. This is all going to be on you. He wasn't surrounded by this supporting cast. Maybe it would be interesting to see if Braxton could travel in time and play with this amount of talent that Justin Fields does, what he could have done. But I just think that Fields is more advanced as a passer than any of these guys. I've had, it seemed a little crazy to people last year to be talking about, well, is he better than Troy? Is he the best quarterback in school history? And we were doing that in the middle of the season. He only played 6 games. He still wasn't what he eventually became as a Heisman finalist or what he could be this year.
Right.
That was still somebody – those were his first 6 starts or 7 starts. But I think that his arm talent I don't know. Your depth of memory of the Ohio State quarterbacks, you've seen way more of them than I have. But I think he's the most polished, best, highest potential, best future NFL prospect. I think he's the best quarterback that Ohio State's ever had.
Well, I'll just throw it in there. I'll just throw this in there. In my opinion, he has all of the goods. All of the goods. And the closest that in that regard that I would put with him would be probably of the guys I've covered would probably be Troy Smith. Because Troy Smith had all the goods. But he wasn't as fast or as big as Justin Fields. He was damn good, though. And I would like to have seen Troy Smith in this year's offense. Because,
Troy Smith wants that too, I can promise.
I'm telling you, though, people have heard me say this many times. He threw a Hollywood movie kind of pass. Snap spiral, beautiful ball. He could run and get out of trouble enough to just keep you honest. And he was smart. He was cagey with the ball. With a few exceptions, he didn't play in an offense that really let him go crazy. But Jim Tressel on occasion did do that. The Michigan-Ohio State game, the game of the century in 2006. Go watch Troy Smith air it out. That was a hell of a game, or any of those Michigan games, really. Push come to shove, he made plays. But Justin, and of course we all know, where I stand with Dwayne Haskins Jr. He is, he may be the last. He may be the last of a breed of a pocket passer, kind of ideal pocket passer quarterbacks who gets to do their thing. I'm talking about at least at Ohio State. But, for 1 year, he was as good as anybody in the country. I think you agree with that. And then, of course, but Justin, I think, can rise to that level of passer. But then you got to remember 4.3 seconds, A to B is, to pardon the Urban Meyer line, to steal his line. Putting all that together, that's Braxton kind of like speed and elusiveness with a Dwayne Haskins Jr. arm. Yes, he stays healthy. And we all saw what happened to him last year when he got banged up at the end of the year. It really hurt Ohio State, in my opinion. Still, they put points on the board. But if he stays healthy, goodness gracious.
Yeah, and I think back to when he arrived, and I was trying to get a feel for, what can Justin Fields do? Who is he? And I thought, well, you're going to take some of the arm of Dwayne Haskins, but maybe not all of it. You're going to take some of the running ability of Braxton Miller, but maybe not all of it. You're going to take some of the, toughness and leadership of J.T. Barrett, but maybe not all of it. And I think I may have undersold it. I just thought that he could do a little bit of what you're saying, everything, every tool. But I thought, well, maybe Dwayne was a better pure passer. Maybe Braxton in the spin move was a little bit more elusive. I'm not sure that we just haven't seen Justin Fields truly reach his potential in all those categories where he might – I don't know that he'll ever have the rocket arm and the accuracy of Dwayne, But in terms of the other stuff, you might have undersold it because he's turned out to be every bit as tough, if not more, than JT Barrett. He's turned out to have a feel for the moment, if not better than what Troy did in those Michigan games. The throw last year in Ann Arbor coming out of the tent to Garrett Wilson, I will never, ever forget it. That was a pure Heisman moment, even if he didn't win it. And when I think that he will in December this year, he'll still be showing that play and talking about that altering the career trajectory for him. It was one of the most insane 5 or 10 minutes, just the whole build-up to it, and then the way he delivered coming off the bench with the brace and rolling out and after everything he'd been through. But
what's amazing is I was thinking about that the other day. If you didn't know everything that led up to that play and you just watch that play, it's a hell of a play. You know what I mean? And then you think that 45 seconds earlier he was in the tent, on the sidelines getting his knee looked at. I mean, yeah, that should have won him. Probably should have won him the Heisman Trophy when you think about it. I mean, but they vote. I mean, like I told you guys all along. I mean, when you've got him and Chase Young going for it, you got split votes.
And J.K. finishing sixth.
And J.K. Dobbins. I mean, no one else had to deal with that. So of course, finished third and fourth. Because Jalen Hurts was stealing all. Was getting he had that backing. He had that Hurts. That Hurts. But yeah, you're right. I mean, and the thing is, all you see, you just, you saw him walk into the Woody Hayes Athletic Center a couple of weeks ago when they returned for workouts. You see a bigger version of Justin Fields. Number one, number two, his confidence is through the roof right now. I mean, he's really feeling it, and that's one of those guys where you're just going, man, just if you just love college football like I do, you just want to see these guys get to play. I mean, because this, and yeah, that's selfish, but this is what they do, This is what I want to get these arguments with people. It's just sports. I go, man, look at and we've had this discussion on here a million times. I won't get it again, except for summation, is that sports are not just so meaningful to people like Ram Ray was talking about last week on my podcast. You live for the fall. A lot of people live for the fall. But on top of that, the jobs that are incorporated in football, baseball, basketball, hockey, soccer around the country is in the millions. Yeah. And the impact of the economic impact of sports, forget about what it means to you psychologically to be able to root for your team. It's not like the 1950s when sports were an afterthought. Now it's different. It's an industry all to itself. But on top of that, yeah, there's nothing like Saturdays in the fall, man. Nothing like it.
Nope. I think beyond that too, like thinking about what's happened in the last couple of weeks with athletes driving this social conversation. We've done that a little bit at Lettermen Row, but what just happened in the state of Mississippi, not possible without college football players taking the lead. And, it's remarkable to see, what happened at Oklahoma State, what's happening in the state of Mississippi. If you think that sports aren't important, look at what they just did to however long that flag has existed for Mississippi, 130 years, 135 years, however long it is. And it came from one tweet from a star running back. So tell me that college football isn't important to people, that it can't bring change, that, obviously the financial impact, you and I are very well aware of what that would do to, any city, any college town, but especially something like, a place like Columbus, even with Fortune 500 companies on every block, you take, you leave an empty horseshoe for a year, that's going to decimate a lot of businesses and going to do significant damage to the university as a whole. We're beating a dead horse there, but the bottom line is, yes, college football is extremely important and we want it.
Hey, well, indulge me here for a second now. I just whenever I start talking about college football, I mean, the passion rises in me. I mean, I'm getting goosebumps. My hair is raising on the back of my neck right now thinking about it because, like I told you, I lost my mother. It was not unexpected, but I lost my mother last Friday, and she was 87 years old, Julia, she was known to her best friends. passed away in Lufkin, Texas. I was down there with my mom when she passed. But all I kept thinking about was just the way my mom cared so much for her sons, and then cared so much, believe it or not, for Alabama football. And what you have to understand, I mean, that's just a sort of a brief look into her life. But back when she was born at the height of the Depression in 1932, and I'm telling you, my mom's mom and dad were dirt poor. They lived out in the middle of nowhere, north of Tuscaloosa, Alabama, north of Northport, Alabama, just where she came from. She didn't have a flush toilet till my dad and her got their first apartment after they got married. So just the things she went through, et cetera, growing up. But that was normal life for her, et cetera. But then she had these 4 boys, and from the get-go, from the first time I remember, my mom in the late 1950s. I was born in '54, so 59, 60, 61 when Bear Bryant, showed up at Alabama and got things going again. First thing I remember is my mom and the passion she had for Alabama football. And you got to remember growing up back then, that's about all we had to cheer about in Alabama. I mean, but my mom also had this understanding of what was going on in the world, what was changing, this compassion, she had empathy before others did for the African Americans, the black community, the Negro as they were called back then, but the African Americans. And it was important to her for her boys to understand what was going on. Like I said in my podcast with Larry James, my mom took us downtown Demopolis during the protest marches back in the mid '60s, and in essence, she wanted us to understand the importance of what we were seeing. She was out there with us when we watched the Freedom Riders go down U.S. Highway 80 about 40 yards from our house, where I grew up in Demopolis, Alabama, in 1965, headed for Selma, and points east, Montgomery, et cetera. And she just thought it was so important for us to understand the changes that were being made. People think you can change something like that, like snapping your fingers. You can't do that. That's why this rebel flag debate just drives me nuts, because, get over it, folks. Number one, the Civil War lasted 4 years. You understand what I'm saying? 4 years. And the rebel battle flag was symbolic of people in the South trying to fight for their way of life, and a huge part of their way of life was the right to own, in their mind, the right to own slaves, et cetera. That wasn't the only thing they'll tell you they were fighting for, but that was pretty much at the crux of it, as Abraham Lincoln figured out, and took care of. But my point is, that's so long ago. You have no attachment to that at all. Get over it. I mean, I was born and raised in the South. We moved to Texas when I was 11 years old, and we just were taught another way. And I've been through that a million times on this podcast. But anyway, my mom meant so much to me because my mom loved sports. She wasn't blessed to have any son who was super great at it, although my baby brother, Tony, he's 62. I can still call him my baby brother. He was pretty good. And my big brother, Ben, was as tough as you'll ever see. Played football, but wasn't a star at it. I was going into the 9th grade. 10th grade, I was 6'2", 150 pounds, and the slowest guy in school. I wasn't built to play football in any form or fashion. My brother Mike could arm wrestle, out arm wrestle any person in Lufkin High School, and he was the all-state trombone player. I mean, Mike was a person unto himself. It was crazy how stout, strong he was, but he followed the beat of a different drummer. Wait, my brother's Ben and Mike passed away as my dad did years ago. But what I'm getting to here is my mom instilled in all of us the love, the passion for sports, especially Alabama football. She would get up in front of the television after we moved to Texas, and she would be right up in front of the television at crucial times in the game, willing Bear Bryant to make the right call, and Johnny Musso or somebody, to make the play. So that's where this thing about sports comes from. It did come from my dad. My mom was out in the backyard throwing the balls. She's the one that took us to Little League practices and things like that. And my dad was a chemical engineer running a plant, and he would come home, take a few shots at the basket on his way in to get his iced tea. By the way, iced tea down south means sweet tea, but to go in. And then meanwhile, my mom was the one who took care of most of the carpools, et cetera. So, that's what you remember most about your mom is how much she sacrificed. And she didn't even see it as sacrifice, how much she was there, how much she screamed from the stands, not just for us, but for our teams and stuff, and how much that meant to you when you grew up and you found yourself doing the same thing for your children's teams, et cetera. And my boys and my daughter, even my daughter Caroline, she's a huge Ohio State fan and a sports fan, but my sons have been blessed to grow up in, I call it the LeBron James Columbus Blue Jackets, and then greatest golden era in Ohio State college football, in my opinion. And we're still living in that era. You agree with that, right, Boston?
Yes, I do.
But my mom taught us to understand that, this is not ordinary. A team like Alabama under Barrett Bryant in the 60s, like I said, the only thing you had to cheer for in the state of Alabama, that was special. She wanted us to understand that and be a part of it. And then understand also the world was changing, and the way the world was in the 50s and 60s was not right, and how continue to do what you can to make those changes. That's what I remember about my mom, and God bless my mom, 87 years old, and as I like to say, her religion, as I wrote in my little tweet, her religion steered her life, and her passion for Jesus Christ and the Lord steered her life. And then her passion and affection for others is what stirred her. And when you have a mom like that, man, fiery, redheaded mom who took no quarter. I mean, she took no guff from anybody. I kind of followed in those footsteps. But when you have somebody like that, you just feel like you were really ensconced in something there that could carry through, and you hope you can pass that along to your children and your grandchildren. My little grandson Owen, et cetera. I'll be telling him about his grandma his great grandma one of these days. Someone he never really got to meet. But yeah, I'm going to miss my mom forever, and that's all I've got to say about that. As Forrest Gump would say. But
she's left a tremendous legacy, Tim. We've all been thinking about you. As you left out some details, but you've been making a ton of trips down to Texas when her health took a turn, and I know it's been hard on you and the rest of your family to get through this. I'm glad that you made it down there in time over the weekend for this one, and we're all still thinking about you and wishing nothing but the best for the May family, because she obviously did a great job. You're the only one that I know, but you're one of my better friends that I've ever met in this profession, and she's obviously done a great job. She deserves a lot of credit for that.
Yeah, and I appreciate you raised at least one son who became mature, and that's my baby brother Tony. At least one of us matured. But anyway, Boston, I want to thank you. I want to thank Urban Meyer, of course, for coming on this podcast again. And Urban's promised to come on, a few more times as the football season nears. We hope. I know you do too, because I want to cover some football, man. I don't want to be sitting around all fall just talking about what could have been, might have been, should have been, or what may be coming. But you know what? Until next week, this is Tim May for my friend Boston Ward. We'll see you then.
Thanks for watching. Subscribe below to get the latest videos from Lettermen Row.
We got Letterman Live, we've got the practice report, we got rapid reaction. Hey, and we got Buckeye IQ with Zach Bourne.
For sure. We got recruiting breakdowns with Berm. We got whatever you need. Ohio State football and Ohio State athletics, we've got you covered here at Lettermen Row.